Hi, I'm Chris. I'll be talking about my learning experiences from the subject ED4461 Indigenous Futures. And during this slideshow, you'll see little activities and approaches that I found quite interesting and entertaining, and I'm hoping to utilize in my future classroom lesson planning and unit planning. And we'll get right into it. So early on, we had an activity called Privilege Walk. Um, the first impression was it was quite an interesting way of dealing with this. It was a variety of questions where people had to look at the implications in life. These could be things such as speaking a different language at home or having divorced parents. And every time that question was relevant to you, you had to take a step back. And I think at the end of the activity, I was quite amazed how many people were behind me and in front of me. And what I've learned from this is that every person comes with a different story, and it's very important not to underestimate their lives and circumstances that they've come with. Like personally, mine, I've come from overseas. I speak a different language at home. I have a different cultural view, and one thing that I found very interesting is that I was very limited on knowledge on what has happened in Australia in the past. So I've been able to sort of shape my own opinion about this. But it's been really interesting during the course of the subject. So the race theory is another thing that amazed me. Like I said, I had limited knowledge, but especially the impact of the curriculum on Indigenous learners. Watman and Duncan reading was talking about how in the past Indigenous families and communities had limited to no influence on the curriculum, and I think on today's day we need to start changing these things. Especially having a strong relationship to the parents is a crucial factor, as it shows that we're one, and that the community is strongly involved in their youth's learning experience and how things are run and what works well and what doesn't work well. And this was emphasized by the journey from past to present, which sort of gave me a bit of better insight of what has happened in the past, what can happen, devastation of some of the Indigenous folks in the past, and the abuse of their land rights and lack of respect and unfairness they were dealt with, and understandably the damage that has come with it. So this is obviously quite a big issue all around the country, but I think I can make a small start by closing the gap in my classroom by improving the youth learning experiences with activities, and ensuring everybody knows that they're equals in my classroom. The next really interesting point that was made was the National Day of Australia and when it should be celebrated, and we had a really nice discussion in the theatre. And most of the activities that I enjoy and I would like to implement in the future are discussions. And I think this one was really engaging, as we had people saying it should stay on the same day, it shouldn't, and some of them in the middle. And I've actually sat myself in the middle because I didn't have a strong point of view, but it was very interesting to see both sides making good solid points. And I think this is obviously an ongoing problem in the country, and it's interesting how this is going to be solved. And I think in the end of the day, finding an even ground on this topic will be the key. And I think the topic itself here being Australia Day might be just one topic where there's disagreement. So this discussion was quite valuable because it can be taken in so many different contexts, and using that way of approaching an issue in a class, I think is a beautiful way to engage everyone and see what opinion they shape from it. Furthermore, I looked at Indigenous perspectives. So one way to engage the students that I've learned through the memory code strategies, such as rhythming songs and sayings, repetition, storytelling, songs and dances, and these are all ways to engage Indigenous learners. And one thing that I've experienced in my first prac was that we had a guest speaker from a community, Indigenous community, and it was a really nice activity. The students were listening to a story that was told about the past, and it was very engaging, very real. And I think this was very beneficial to all students, but especially those who were able to relate. And I think a very great activity to have someone come in and tell a story instead of reading it just from a book. Um, moving on to pedagogical strategies, I'll go back to my last placement, and I think the perspectives that the school that I was at, Kerwin State High, that they implemented were awesome. So the new art and size of teaching focuses on the teacher actually making active decisions before they plan a lesson, before they shape it. And already in those questions, they are making sure that crucial aspects such as the student's culture and identity is taken in consideration when you make lesson plans. And this goes into the unit plans, obviously. And I found this very interesting that early on these decisions are made so that the school is all on the same base and promoting this kind of approach. And a very, very nice way to do this. Also, we all have embedding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives. At Curwen, they were actually having Indigenous Knowledge Centre. In a way, they were in a library. They have supporting staff there. They have very specific members in the school to help Indigenous students, and they also have Indigenous leader programs. So they're very actively doing a lot, and the school has a very high percentage of Indigenous students. I think it's close to 19%. So it was a very, very valuable experience being there at placement, and I wasn't able to utilize the skills that I've learned through the subject at the time, but I'm hoping at my next placement that I'll be able to do so. Talking about Indigenous communities, Curwen had quite a big one, and I think it's very important that such things as the 3Rs are respected. So looking at that one, they're really straightforward, I think, especially with such things as respect. That's little things like everyone else does too. Saying please and thank you, waiting to speak, respecting people's personal space and feelings. I think as long as we start this on the right basis, that's a really, really important factor, and having that strong relationship to the parent, like mentioned earlier, is very, very crucial for a good learning experience for the student as well, knowing that there's a strong support system behind them. Like I said, building a relationship with the family, perhaps the country and place that you're at, and also the reconciliation. Like I said in my classroom, that everyone knows that they're compatible with each other and that they believe that they're equals, and enabling this process of building a healthy and productive relationship ultimately works towards closing the gap, and that's my small goal for the classroom, and hopefully then moves on to a bigger area. This is obviously going to know also about my own identity. I will try and set put myself out there a little bit as well to show that I also have my own culture, and I'm not going to be hiding that myself, but I'm also going to welcome other people's perspectives and ideas on how they approach things. And knowing my students will be important there. An inclusive pedagogical approach will be implemented, a supportive classroom. I still set expectations and how rules will be run, and ultimately building a relationship with the student on a professional level, of course, but making sure that they're welcome and that everyone is welcome in the class. And finally, obviously, knowing what I'm teaching. This is all part of the unit plan, making sure that certain things are implemented, whether that's the country and place I'm at, or very significant events such as the NAIDOC Week, the National Aboriginal and Islander Day Observance Committee. Those kind of things are obviously important to the community, and making sure I pay the right amount of respect and implement this into my lessons will ultimately help the classroom and learning experience for those students, knowing that their culture is respected and valued. Finally, working with the community. I think a yarning circle, once again, I say discussions I find them quite crucial and useful. The yarning circle was a very, very valuable activity that I found, especially being able to, as a collective group, build respectful relationships and preserve and pass on cultural knowledge. Being able to have a discussion and perhaps resolve issues or differences in opinion that occur at the time is a very interesting way of dealing with things. So the students might be able to work this out themselves, or I think through discussion, more and more points come up. It's not just going to stay with one question, and I think this is a beautiful way to approach it. And it's also actively to see how students are making progress. So yeah, questions will lead to further questions and discussions, and that's a beautiful way to see where the discussion goes. Finally, to conclude my learning experience, I believe that I learned that in order to provide all of my students the best chance to succeed in life, I need to approach teaching from various angles and perspectives. So this will include having the opportunity to teach students in ways that they maybe have never considered before looking at things. So there's like an elder speaker coming from the community and talking about how they experienced something in their life and how they've dealt with it, and then so on. And I believe in the future, those students, they will have challenges in life, and being able to be prepared for this and consider it towards other people's perspectives, and having that angle of approach, sometimes changing, will be beneficial for them in the future reference. So by including teaching approaches, strategies, whether that's a yarning circle or making sure that special events are considered in my learning and unit plans. I think those things hopefully will be able to have students be considerate, especially those that are non-Indigenous. But I think both sets of students will benefit from this, whether they learn from a situation from a different perspective through a yarning circle, whilst the Indigenous students will benefit being able to express themselves in their culture and finding learning more relevant and engaging. Finally, being foreign and coming to Australia offered me a clean slate on what I believe, and I'm hoping to utilise this and the learning that I've done in the past. And this subject has been very, very helpful for me to approach this in a different way, and I'm really keen to see how successful I will be to implement the strategies that I've learned and how success comes with it. Thank you very much for listening, and that's all.